choir, could I get you all to move down here? Would that be okay? I know it's last minute, but I think we're all feeling a little stressed this morning, given what's going on in the world. So if we could just be together, maybe that would help. And we're in the midst of a political time, midst of a little bit of fear that we're all worrying about, praying for those who are in harm's way. And I'm not going to preach about that, because our gospel will do it for me, I think. It is a doozy of a gospel, I hope you will agree. I mean, we have a wild, possessed man wandering naked in a graveyard, a legion of demons, pigs throwing themselves off of cliffs, and people who were so uncomfortable with Jesus' ability to heal that they asked him to leave town. So if you came to church this morning wanting a nice, warm, fuzzy, cozy gospel, maybe we don't get that. But this admittedly rather bizarre story is told in Mark's gospel and Matthew's gospel and here in Luke's gospel. So clearly it had an important message back in Jesus' day and still has much to teach us today. So let's back up a few verses first in Luke's gospel, the ones that come right before the story today. How did we get here? It's about Jesus calming a storm. I'm sure many of you remember that story. Jesus had asked his disciples to get a boat ready to go over to the other side of the lake. Now that in itself was pretty strange. In fact, it was more than a little disturbing, because the folks on the other side of the lake, they were Gentiles. They were the others that no good Jew would want to go near. Jesus and his disciples usually stayed on this side of the Galilee. The Gentiles stayed on their side. So why does Jesus want to go over there? But that's what he tells them to do. So they all get in the boat, and Jesus promptly takes a nap. In fact, he continues to snooze even though a wild, horrible storm arises, one so massive that in Scripture it says his poor disciples truly thought that they were going to drown. They wake him up, "Lord, save us, we are perishing." Jesus stands up, and we hear he rebukes the wind and the raging storm, and all is calm. "Where's your faith?" he asks his disciples. In fear, it says, in amazement, they ask one another, "Who is this? He commands even the winds and the raging storms, and they obey him." So now the boat gets to the other side. There is no welcome wagon. There is no welcome to the neighborhood committee. Instead, immediately as he steps out of the boat, a man possessed by demons meets him. We don't know what the man's demons were. There's a lot of scholarly work trying to figure it out. Some say they were actual demonic spiritual forces. Others say perhaps it was a mental illness. We don't know. But what we do know is that this poor man has been tormented for a very, very long time, and he has been ostracized by his community. He has become the feared other. And in the Gospel of Mark's story, we hear even more about how he had been so disturbed, they chained him up, hand and foot, but he repeatedly broke out of the chains. They left him to make his home in the graveyard, where he wanders naked, howling night and day. He feels so haunted in his misery that he cuts himself up with stones, tearing his very flesh apart. Can we imagine such isolation, such desolation? He has been exiled and left to live among the dead. Imagine the loneliness. No one would go near him to offer a compassionate word until Jesus does. And Jesus asks him one simple question. What is your name? "Who are you? What is your name?" Now, the answer is not so simple because the demons answer for him. "We are legion," for there were many demons. Demons so strange that they begged to be released from the man and instead put into a herd of swine, pigs, that rush down a steep slope into the lake and are drowned. We need to take a little sidebar here. What's with the pigs? Right? You're all wondering, what's with the pigs, Jesus? So we have to go back in time and remember who this story was originally told to. Might not make a lot of sense in modern-day Petaluma, where we are obsessed with chickens, but it had a lot of resonance for the Jewish community that was living on those shores of the Galilee. Remember where the story takes place, in the land of the Gerasenes. Gerasa is now called Jerash, and it's in modern-day Jordan. Back in Jesus' day, it was a prominent part of the Decapolis, 10 Greco-Roman cities that all were east of the Jordan River. And unlike the Jews who disdained all things pig-related, pigs were actually an important part of Greco-Roman culture and economy because they were used as offerings to the deities, sacrificial offerings for purification and for blessing of land. And they even ate their meat during religious feast. If you're a Jew, so not kosher, right? But even more important to the Jews who were hearing this story is the term legion. Legion can mean many things, right? In fact, it means many, a whole lot, a multitude. The man Jesus encountered was filled with demons. But in Jesus' time, the story might also have been making a reference to a legion of the Roman army. And a legion held about 6,000 trained soldiers, trained very, very specifically, in this case, to put down the Jews whenever they rebelled against the Roman occupation. Gets worse. The 10th legion, called the Fretensis Legion, was an elite group of those soldiers stationed in the Galilee. They were well known and well hated by the Jews who Jesus had been ministering to. And here's the link back to the piggies. As a further insult to the Jewish population, on the banner of the Fretensis Legion was a wild boar, a pig. It was as if the Romans were deliberately using the emblem of a pig to taunt and further insult the Jewish population. And here's a little twist in the story. Think about the image of Jesus putting the demons into the pigs and then having the pigs fall off of a cliff to be drowned. When Jesus' disciples, the ones who had sailed him over to the other side, got back home, what story might they have told? Might some of them have witnessed this story and said, Jesus was tweaking the Romans? Maybe they retold the story for political reasons back home. Because we know that many actually, people were drawn to Jesus hoping he would be a political Messiah, right? He would be the one to drive out the Romans, maybe even driving them into the sea, just like those pigs. Stories can be interpreted in a lot of ways, right? Can we be done with the piggies? What about the demon-possessed man? The man's local community has completely shunned him. They tried chaining him up, but even that didn't work because the demons were too strong. He couldn't be caged up. So what did they do? They discarded him. They cast him out. It is so much easier for us to keep those who make us uneasy on the edges out of sight, isn't it? I mean, they probably couldn't even remember his name if once they had known it. But what are Jesus' very first words to him? What is your name? Let's get past the barriers, past the demons. Who are you? Who are you inside? Jesus tenderly affirms the dignity of this child of God by asking, what is your name? And then we have this miraculous healing. It almost goes by like, oh, he's healed. And note where the man ends up after he's healed. This man who had spent his days wandering through graveyards is now sitting at the feet of Jesus. It's the posture of a disciple. That's where disciples sat, at the foot and the feet of the teacher. Understandably, he begs to stay with Jesus, right? Of course he does. And Jesus says, no. Return to your home, declare how much God has done for you. Jesus actually commissions this now truly unbound man to be an evangelist amidst the Gentiles. Some say he's the very first Gentile evangelist. So he went away proclaiming throughout the city how much Jesus had done for him. Jesus has crossed a dangerous lake, slept through a wild storm, deliberately stepped into Gentile country, crossing so many boundaries that as a good Jewish rabbi he should not have crossed, all to demonstrate God's love and God's healing power that has no boundaries. And how did the locals react to this demonstration of amazing healing power when they see him sitting at Jesus' feet, all well and no longer possessed? Do they rejoice? No. Their fear is still so strong. They say, Jesus, get out of town. We don't want you here. They ask Jesus to leave. So I think this crazy, bizarre, wonderful gospel invites us to wonder, what are the fears that grip us so intently? Who are the people that make us afraid? What are the chains that bind us? It seems such a human nature thing that we are afraid of the other. But who are those people who are not like us but might welcome conversation? Who do we push to the margins and out of sight because it's just more comfortable for us? Can we find strength to cross boundaries, even boundaries that might make us uneasy? Can this story inspire us to reach out to those who feel isolated or afraid or lonely for whatever reasons? Perhaps because of mental illness, but maybe because of skin color or gender identity or teenage angst, or because they have different political views than we do. Our demons are legion. And our society has created so many chains. But our gospel today invites us, it compels us to break some of those chains, to cross boundaries, to reach out to all who live in isolation or fear or loneliness. Perhaps just by asking a simple question. What is your name?